Hello and welcome to Real Estate Today. My name is Ed Cox and my co-host is Maria Babicki, and we'd like to welcome you to our show. Today we have a great show and we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to be quick about it. I know everybody knows that they've been worried about their lawns and water, and it's in the news now, so we thought that we would have an expert on wells and water and the potential for the drought and how that might impact us. So with that in mind, Maria, could you introduce our guest and get the show started?
Yes, I can. Our guest today is Larry Grela from Grela Well Drilling. He is the president and owner. Thank you for coming to the show.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Let's begin by having you tell us about yourself and how the company got started.
Myself, I started when I got out of high school, joining a small company, businesses my dad owned, very, very small. And after arguing with him that I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I decided I'm going to stay in this. I always realized that water was going to be a very, very expensive commodity someday. Whether I was right or wrong, well, I found out it is. And I've really enjoyed it. We've built this company. We're the largest water well contractor in the state. We do 20 to 30 jobs each and every day of various water problems that people have. And we're very busy. We stay very busy. And this year with the drought, it's even been exceptionally crazy for us and very difficult for a lot of people that are on fixed incomes or going without water. And it's every town. It's not pinpointed in one town or another town. Every town has it. We're chasing this drought everywhere. And we're just telling people, be very careful, conserve, do whatever you can, because a new well can be anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 on the average. They can go much higher in tough areas, or they could be less in some areas, but that's a good average. Most people don't usually have $7,000 to $10,000 just laying around their piggy bank for water. They'd have to go on vacation or buy a car or something. To me, I try to just say, you know, if we do not need to spend this money, and we can get you over the hump of, you know, just conserving a little bit, maybe put a storage tank in, do a few different things that will buy time and hope that this rainfall will come that we've been all wishing for all season, and maybe some snow melt and get us out of trouble.
So the fact that it rained a little bit last week and we saw some puddles in the driveway for the first time, that hasn't really helped a lot.
You know, it really hasn't helped the aquifers, but I'll tell you, lakes like Bantam Lake in some areas have really gotten a little bit fuller because of the runoff from brooks and streams and fields, drains from streets. So that kind of throws people off, saying, wow, we must be fixed, but the water's not getting in the aquifer. You know, a tree will drink 300 gallons a day, a good-sized tree. Evaporation and the grass, anything that we've gotten that hasn't run off hasn't gone down in the earth. You know, we need a lot more than that.
Could we start with the basics? Can you tell us about a shallow well versus like a hand dug?
Sure. A shallow well can be termed a few different things. Shallow wells can be a well that's not a drilled well that's not very deep, under 200 feet deep, or a shallow well could be basically a hand dug well that's laid up with stone or cement tiles, which they had in the old days, and there are a lot of them still around. Those are the wells that are affected the worst because the water tables have really, really dropped. And nothing, 20 inches of rain we're low on, and nothing feeding them. They are very dependent on rainwater. Down in the Simsbury Valley, you see a lot of point wells. And the point wells could be 25, 30 feet down, getting water out of sand. Well, those are all failed because the rainfall. And as you get down to the deeper wells that are 200 deeper, you know, the amount of wells that are failing the percentages are less.
But if the drought were to continue,
If the drought were to continue into next year, I don't know what's going to happen with this. I mean, we are seeing that with new wells, the wells are going much deeper. Where we used to see water at 150, 200 feet down while we were drilling, now we're seeing water at 300 and 275 and 400 and 500. We're reaching deeper into Mother Nature's earth to obtain water that we never obtained before, is what we're doing.
So you have never seen anything like this before?
No, in my lifetime I have never. In 1999 there was a drought, and we were very, very, very busy, but it didn't reach the depth of where we are right now. This has really affected not only residential wells, but municipal wells. It's affected everything.
last night I was at a land trust year holiday party, and we were talking, and you know, I think I basically knew it, but basically the entire town of Simsbury gets their water from the wells. Yeah. Even if you have public water, it's coming from the wells.
It's coming from a well somewhere in most cases. A big thing that it's hard to believe, but 85% of our clear water, not ocean water, is still underground. So if you take all the reservoirs and lakes, well, 85 is still underground. And so they're tapping the water underground. But again, their wells are being affected also with this low water. I feel that the towns, city water companies, and the private water companies, they should have really got more information out to the public months before this. Now all the reservoirs are very low, the wells are running low, and they're scrambling, saying, "Wow, we've got a drought going on." Well, they knew the drought was coming. They should have really publicized it a little bit more. And same with their own personal water wells. It should have been publicized, because, you know, people call us up and say, "I don't have the water I used to have." I said, "Don't you realize we're in a drought situation?" We really, you know, they don't have that information. But it is, they do have to talk to us, and we tell them that you're really running low.
Right.
Now, when we met with you, you said something interesting, and I don't think a lot of people think about this, but when the ground freezes...
Yeah, that is a problem that we're facing right now. We're at the verge of, if the ground freezes, it can rain all it wants, and the rain will just run off, head to drains, brooks, streams, will not get in the aquifer. That means it will not fix your well this year. It'll be springtime. And hopefully the snow melt, if we get a lot of snow, and the rain in the spring will make a difference.
Okay. Well, what are the signs if a well is in trouble?
The first sign is low pressure. Mm-hmm. Water getting all like stirred up, so you're getting like grit and discolorment. That's when we get the calls and saying, "There's got to be something wrong." And we get out there, and our techs get out there, and they see that the equipment's running properly, but the well is low. So, you know, the first thing is, you know, go easy, conserve a little bit, see if you can make it work. If you can't, then a new well is your next option.
You talked about fracking too.
Yeah, we hydrofrack. We've hydrofracked 400 to 500 wells a year, and they're existing wells and new wells, but they really need to be 250 feet or deeper to really get the full impact out of it. We need some well to work with. If they're really shallow and the water isn't in those aquifers, the hydrofrack won't fix it.
What does that mean, fracking? What are you doing?
Hydrofracking is a term that, and people know it from gas and oil wells and get scared when you say that word, but because they pump in chemicals in the earth to hold open, and proppers. Proppers are little plastic balls to open up the seams in the earth and wedge them. And all these chemicals is what gets into the aquifers. When we hydrofrack, we're using water that is tested and comes out of a clean well, and we're not using any chemicals, we're not using proppers. Basically, it's just flushed out nicely and done. And so your well could change in your water samples could change, because if we're getting a new flow of water into your well, it could change the chemistry of your well. It doesn't mean bad. You may have had a high iron level before and now you don't have, because it's blended with new water. So it can change a little bit, but it doesn't destroy anything.
When we met, we were learning about the different wells and different depths. And one of the indications you were talking about was like if you had a jet pump, if you have a pump in your basement, that means it's not as deep a well. Is that correct?
In most cases. If you have a jet pump in the basement, the most that's pumping is 150 feet down. And the lower the water goes in your well, the less water the pump will put out, because it has to lift it vertical, and that slows the flow up. Jet pumps are still out there, and they're a good pump in the right situation. They've been around forever, and as long as they're working, they're all good. But submersibles are the way to go, because they pump right from the bottom, and they will pump power and pressure.
And with that is that we talked about the Farmington Valley Health Department. You can go to their website sometimes and determine the depth of your well, because I don't know what the depth
if your
of
well is after 1973, you can go to Farmington Valley Health if you're in Farmington Valley Health District, or Torrington Area Health. They have about 13 or 14 towns. They're mostly online now, and you can find out information about your well, what it did originally. That doesn't mean it's what it's doing today in a drought situation, but what it was originally, and you can find the depth out, and that's important, because if you're thinking, well, whether should I deepen it, the well, or should I hydrofrac the well, or should I just put another well? Getting that information helps everybody.
So when you dig a new well, it's not always in the same spot. You could actually go to another spot, or
when we install a new well, we are in a different location. There's no rule of thumb how far away from the existing well you have to be. We try to separate them a little bit. If you have room on your property to do that and meet all your requirements of drains, distances, and septics and sewers and everything else, that property lines and neighbors' sewers and septics and drains, we try to separate them a little bit and install a new well. When we do install a new well, let's say it's a replacement well, chances are it's going to be a lot deeper than the original, because the original one's not making water. So it's a new location and a new depth.
do you use dowsing to find?
We do. It's a, it doesn't make water, but it's a good reference point for us to try to get you the best well and the best bang for your dollar.
So one of the mechanicals that you were describing, which I like to think that I understand how most of the things work, but I didn't really understand how. I mean, I knew the water's down there.
Sure.
We drag it up, we suck it up into the house. But then you were talking about, from a conservation standpoint, if you had a 300-foot well, you have a certain amount of water already in the well.
Yeah.
And if you don't use that up,
Right.
could you explain that?
Yeah. Depending on the static level. And the static level is the height that the well fills up in your well over a period of the evening. Okay? So if you have a 300-foot well and it fills up to, say, within 20 or 30 feet from the ground surface, it gives you 1.5 gallons of storage per foot. So you could have 400 gallons of storage. An average family uses approximately 300 gallons a day. Basically, 65 gallons per person is what the state goes by for reference. It doesn't mean every family uses that much a day. So if you have a 400-gallon storage in your well and you're only using 300, you're never going to have a problem. If you're using it and spread out over the course of the day. If you're making 1 gallon a minute gives you 60 gallons an hour. Gives you 610 hours. Well, an average family using 300 they have more than sufficient amount of water, along with the 400 gallons of storage in that well. But if you have a 100-foot well and it only fills up and you only have 50, 60 gallons of storage in there, then you're in trouble.
Right. And how when I grew up, when I was a kid, I don't know, we had well, and we didn't wash the dishes if someone was using the bath. You know, I think we were conservation, and I've kind of stuck with that. I mean, I put the washing machine on at 10 o'clock at night, or we run the dishwasher when nobody's in the house, or, you know, so I think just from how I was, but I think there's other people who have 3 kids in the house and everybody takes a bath at the same time. That would make a difference.
Yeah, a lot of that growing up wells were a lot shallower, and some wells were weaker than others, and the old style jet pump did not pump that fast. So if you try to do more than one thing at once, well, the pump, even if your well had water, it just couldn't get it to the house quick enough. It was meant for using one thing at a time, and it's like the Model A Ford. My grandfather did okay, but he didn't go on Route 84. So they're meant for what they're meant for.
So what would your tips be for someone like that, say a couple, they travel during the week and they're heavy on the water during the weekend?
If they travel during the week, we know the well, even if it's a weaker well, the well will fill up to its maximum level, static level. So when they get home, they're going to have a full well. If their well is not making a lot of gallons per minute, then what will happen is, if they're trying to do all their washing one day and all their cleaning and everything they want to do in one day, they may deplete their well. All depends on what it's making per minute. So stretching things out a little bit is a better, if you have a weak well.
Okay.
And then I know that, you saw in California with the big droughts there, they stopped letting people wash their cars. They don't water their lawns.
Right.
That uses a lot of water to water a lawn.
Watering a lawn takes a tremendous amount of water, and it's fine to do. Everybody wants a greener lawn in the neighborhood than the neighbor. It's fine as long as your well and your equipment is geared for it. A lot of these big homes in the valley here have more than one well. We'll put a well in for drinking water, and we'll put a well in just for irrigation, just so that they have more supply than they need.
Now, when you met with us, you told us about a situation, and I think it was somewhere in the Burlington area, where someone had a well, and it was like 200 feet, and across the street there was 400 feet, and the one with 400 feet kept watering his lawn all the time, and it was sort of affecting the other well?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation where the neighbor's well was much deeper and across the street, and he was watering his lawn from early morning hours and really, really flooding his yard. And this neighbor wakes up and he doesn't have any pressure. Mm-hmm. And he says to me, "What can I do?" I says, "Did you talk to your neighbor?" And he says, "Yes," and that didn't work out. So I says, "The only thing you can really do is take your well deeper and try to obtain more water, get more reserve to get you past this problem." After the neighbor shut his sprinklers off, this guy had plenty of water. So we know they're connected in the aquifer. But so we did. We took the well deeper, and everything worked out.
Good. And as far as you gave us a figure of like roughly $7,000 to $10,000.
It's averages on a complete well connected to a house pump system, everything needed to make it work, and that's pretty average.
Do you ever come across it being much more than that in unique situations?
Yeah, well, there are areas in this state, along with other states, that $25,000 for a well or multiple wells is not unheard of. Mm-hmm. There are some really difficult areas in the state where getting water is very difficult. But that's not your average.
Mm-hmm. I've always thought about the geography, and if we take Simsbury, if you're up on the ridge, Pinnacle Mountain or Metacom, you're way up on this mountain. Do you have to drill till you get down?
You know, that is a question that's always been brought up over the years. You know, it isn't that way.
Okay.
And you wonder why, but it isn't. You know, we've got them up on Deer Cliff. I mean, that's a high point up there, and they make all kinds of water, and things are great. But down in the valley, we have them, and they're fine too. So, or at the bottom of Avon Mountain, where you're below Deer Cliff, those wells are fine too. You know, it's just funny how the aquifers are.
Now, when we discussed certain ways that you could kind of get someone over the hump, if you know, through the drought, you mentioned storage tanks.
Yeah, I mean, if the well is making, and we try to use a gauge of a gallon a minute. Let's say you have a well that is 150 feet deep, and it's making a gallon a minute. So you really just don't have the reserve of a 300-foot well. So we can install plastic storage tanks, 300-gallon tanks and 400-gallon tanks in the basement if you have room with booster pumps. And that'll give you the reserve. So while you're sleeping, the reserve fills up, and you're fine when you use it the next day. It's equal to having reserve in a well. But the key to that whole thing is the well must be making at least a gallon a minute to really make it work. If you're not making that, then you're just throwing money away.
So back, the one thing about the water at my house is I walk over to the sink and I open it up and I get a glass of water, and I just love the taste of the water. How are you? I just think that the best water I can taste is coming out of my tap.
Well, you know, I'm partial to well water.
I do know that, but
you know, I go to houses and people have a cooler, Poland Springs, and they'll say to me, "I don't drink the well water." I says, "Why? Your well, if it isn't tested, have it tested. There's no chemicals. If it comes up clean, you have the best, safest water in the world. Why would you buy water that possibly has plastic contaminants going into it and maybe chemicals in it? You have the best right in your own yard, coming out of the Mother Earth. You don't like the taste of it, you can put a filter system on it. You can take taste and odor, and you can change anything you want and have crystal clean water for your family. And to me, that's what I suggest.
right.
Well, we come across quite a lot of buyers who like public water, public sewer. So what's your...
Well, public water and public sewer, I think that public sewer is a great thing because to replace a septic system is very expensive. You know, public water, there's nothing wrong with public water. I just don't like the chlorine and all the chemicals. And it's not safe for you. It doesn't belong there. You know, you're giving this to your family, and you've got to decide that yourself. A well, if you have a great well, a pump can last 20 years and never have to do a thing. But people hear the horror stories of the worst wells. They don't hear about the good wells. Over a period of time, city water and public water has gotten much more expensive than it used to be. There are parts of the country where $300-400 a month for water is a common thing. You know, years ago, public water was very inexpensive, and you always said, well, if I have a well and the pump goes, it's going to cost me $1,000 or $1,500. But today, things have changed on that too. City water and public water is not as inexpensive as it used to be, and it's not going to be. The state keeps setting all these regulations on quality of water and testing, and they can't afford to give it to you cheap anymore. You know, as we test deeper on everything out there for water, we're finding, you know, radon, we're finding arsenic, we're finding lead in the pipes, we're finding things we never found before because we didn't test for that. And so, you know, I mean, just be aware of what you're using and what you're feeding your family.
Now, you put in carbon filters, right?
We put in carbon filters, and the carbon filters will strip chlorine out of city water, public water. They will also take taste and odor. Carbon will take radon out of water. It's different type of carbons. The problem with that is it's expensive to get rid of. So what we try to do is go to a bubbler system that aerates the radon, if you have radon in your water, and aerates it up into the air, and there's no charge for servicing, basically.
Right.
It's not like trying to get rid of something that has radon in it.
Okay. And carbon filters are approximately how much?
Carbon filters can be anywhere from a $25 small carbon filter to a $3,000 larger filter.
Okay.
And the other thing is that we talked about, like for us in real estate, with home inspections, you are the source of true water testing. Is that how?
Well, if you're buying a home, make sure someone is thoroughly licensed and insured to do your recovery test and your water testing. You don't want someone out there that says, yeah, I think I can do it, and then you wind up with an $8,000 bill after because you moved in the house and you don't have water. And you want to make sure they're licensed and certified to do testing, and that they tell you the test that you really should take. You know, because you want to, if you're going to be testing your water, you want to test for everything that could be in the water that could harm your family.
Okay, and you told us that the well cap, it should be a certain height out of the ground?
Yeah, your casing, your well casing, by state code has to be a minimum of 6 inches out of the ground. That's so that surface waters and snow melts do not get into the well and cause bacteria. And the well cover has to be the new style cover that is sealed and has a screen to keep varmints and spiders and bees and things like that out of your well, because that causes bacteria.
Okay. Now, we're getting to the tail end of our show. We're about to conclude, and we would like to ask you what our viewers should know about wells, like to sum it all up for them.
Things you really should know is don't take advantage of, don't just take for granted that your well is always going to be good and test good. Have your well tested every few years, and possibly you get it chlorinated, because bacteria grows. And, you may, when you bought your house, have a clean test, but that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way for 20 or 30 years. Have it tested regularly. It doesn't cost much, just to make sure it's safe. You're feeding this to your family. Testing is a smart thing to do. If it needs chlorination, chlorinate it, get it chlorinated, or do it yourself. You can find this on a website, how to do it. Make sure you have the right well cap on there. And basically take notice of your well. If a car smashes into it and breaks the well cap and it's open to the weather, get it fixed. These are things, that really you have to pay attention. You're feeding this to your family, and you really want to be cautious about it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining
You're
us
very
today.
welcome.
Your visit here is timely with the drought, and it's been really interesting. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And we appreciate you watching our show. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.